put our email in the chat. This is somewhere where if you guys have any sort of questions after this call that come up, feel free to send those over to this email and we'll be able to get back to you guys very quickly.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
However, with that being said, I'd love to answer some questions if anybody has them right now.
Okay. Does anybody have a question? Raise your hand or unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Susan and I have some questions to ask.
Yeah, of course.
Is it competitive?
That's a great question.
International.
Yeah. So the program is enormously competitive in the fact that, we are accepting a relatively small number of our applications. However, what I will say is that even though we are highly competitive, the people who get accepted come from a number of different avenues. And so what that's to say is that even though it is highly competitive, what we're really looking to do is maximize the engagement of the scholars in the program. And so what that's to say is that being part of a number of different math competitions, having won a lot of math competitions, it's a great way, to differentiate yourself in that you're telling us that you have these great talents. What we're also looking for is on those essay components of the application, what other programs have you been a part of that may not even necessarily be all that prestigious. We're really looking to see those sorts of things together to try and maximize, as I mentioned, the engagement of scholars. So even though it's very competitive, that does not necessarily mean that you should not apply if you haven't been a part of, very well-known math competitions have not been, taking every single different math course at your school. That is okay. What we really are looking for is the application as a whole to try and find the right students to be part of the program. Does that help answer that, or do you have any more qualifying questions?
Yeah, I do. In the application, do you guys look at the nationality of the student, and does it affect the result?
So yeah, it's a question we get a lot. Do we have quotas for certain countries? The answer is no. The answer is when we're looking at these applications, we're looking at all together. And the only time we'll look at a student's nationality, where they're from, is to try and look at their, resume, what they've done, based on where they're located. And so that's to say that somebody based in New York City, we're going to evaluate a little bit differently than somebody who might be from rural Nepal. Because we understand the fact that they have access to different sorts of opportunities. And so if somebody from a smaller town or a smaller country is able to do a lot with their limited resources, we really value that, as opposed to somebody who might be a part of a lot, but might have actually access to a lot as well. And that's not to say that we don't accept people from both of those different groups. We do. But that's to say that the only time we are looking at somebody's nationality is to sort of try and get a better understanding of what they have available to them. But I should say that we don't accept a certain number from a country. We don't limit it so that if we've already accepted 2 from Mongolia, we can't accept anybody else. That is not at all what we do. We try to look at it, each application independently, review them, and then discuss them.
Okay. Also, so in the application, it's important to show that I'm really motivated and passionate about participating. So that's the main what they were looking for.
Yeah, I would say that as a whole, what we're looking for is some demonstration of talent in math or science. So showing that you've done something that demonstrates that you go beyond the normal high school setting, right? Anything really, whether you've written an extra paper outside of high school, if you've been a part of a program, being part of this program, this community is something that we value on that application, something like this. So being able to show some of that, and then of course on those essay components especially, what we're really looking to do is try to figure out who really wants to be engaged with the courses, who is somebody who's going to be coming to a lot of our calls, is going to be wanting to ask questions to these great scientists, is going to be wanting to interact with other scholars from around the world and do some projects, somebody like that. And so if you're able to showcase that in your application through your essays, through also demonstrating that in the past you've done something like that. You've actually taken advantage of some opportunity to push your education further. That is exactly what we're sort of looking for in the application review process.
Okay, great. Thank you,
Thank
Hussein, for the
you.
questions. We see some raised hands. So let's go to Shin Sarang, and then we go then Batman, then Nandeng, etc.
Hello.
Hi, Shinsara.
I'm Shinsara, and I have a few questions to ask.
Yeah.
First, do you have any suggestions or reminders to students who are participating in this activity?
Yeah, I'm sorry, do I have any reminders? I don't know if I fully understood the question.
Like something we should be warned about?
I see. The one thing I should say is that, one thing I didn't mention is that what we are very accommodating of is that if 1 week you guys have a number of very big exams at school, we are okay if you're communicating that with us, telling us that you can't be part of the program for a week, or that you're going to catch up on your lecture materials. And so if it's a one-off thing where, 1 week or 2 weeks, or maybe even 3 weeks throughout the year, you have something really major and you can't really participate as much, we are totally understanding of that. And of course, the last thing we would want is for this program to impact you guys at all in your education or in terms of your futures. However, with that being said, if you're somebody who is part of so much, that's not 3 weeks, but that's actually the majority of the weeks, that is something that, is not ideal in our program. And that's something that we definitely are looking at, and we're trying to make sure that people are engaged, as I mentioned before. And so I would say that, the one warning I would have is that if you are somebody who's part of, let's say, 30 different programs, and you know that every single day you have very limited time to do anything like this, I would say that this might not be the right program for you, just because it does require some degree of time, some degree of effort. And we want people who want to be actually taking advantage of all those different opportunities, because as it is a very selective program, we want to give those spots to people who really can take advantage of it, right? So I would say that that's the sort of warning I would have to you. Does that make sense, Shincharan, or is there something else you were sort of trying to ask?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have no other questions to ask. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Shincharan.
Yeah, great. So the next one is Batman. I see.
Hi there, everybody. First of all, thank you to the TEF team as well as to James for taking the time out to talk to us all today. I just had a couple of questions about the program in general. First off, I just wanted to get an idea of approximately how many applications you guys might receive every year, what the percentage of applications are, what percentage are typically admitted. Just getting a little idea about that.
Yeah. So we don't release exact numbers every year, and I can tell you that they do fluctuate pretty heavily on the last few years. Last year, we got a significant amount more than the year before, and we do anticipate getting even more this year. What I can tell you is that last year's acceptance rate, I'll tell you, is in the general range of about 10%. I will say that, the applications we get are usually all qualified. We don't get a whole lot of applications where we open up and we say, this is certainly immediately a no. So it is competitive in that way. But as I mentioned before, there's a lot of different ways to get accepted. And so as opposed to, let's say we're looking at something like an SAT or an IQ test, and you say, okay, this is what I got, and so that's my sort of percentage that I need to be in. That's not at all the sort of things we're looking at right now. So really, we're looking at your application as a whole, trying to figure out the best sort of group of cohorts.
Gotcha. So it's a very holistic process, is what I'm hearing. Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. I just had one more other question regarding, I guess, the little bit of the logistics and more on the ground practicality of it. The first one was that, given that the program is bringing together students from all around the world, I was kind of wondering how you guys handle the challenges of asynchronous work or coordinating and accommodating with different time zones.
That's a great question. So all of the different lectures themselves are pre-recorded in our studio by the professors, and we release them all together as part of the entire course to all the different scholars from around the world who are taking them. And so those are the lectures that anybody is able to take whenever they want, whenever they have time to. And now we have once a week sessions with the teaching fellow, recitations, and office hours. Those sessions, we try to fluctuate the time to try and accommodate as many different time zones as possible. Of course, we do have some scholars who are up at crazy hours, midnight to try and get on a call, especially with some of our professors. What I will say is that we try for any call that's with an actual professor, because we know how important those calls are, is we try to put them at middays on Saturdays. And so what we find is that that's the best timing for the majority of different, I should say middays, New York time, US Eastern Standard. And so that is usually a time that works for the most amount of scholars, but for those recitations office hours, we try to change up the time enough that everybody's able to come to at least some of them.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for clarifying on that.
Yeah.
I just had another question, and I saw this on the Facebook post kind of advertising this, and there was a mentioned 5-day trip to New York City, and I was just wondering if you guys could share some more details about that, what that trip would
Yeah.
involve, how it contributes to the overall program.
Yeah, for sure. So that trip, as I mentioned before, I have to specify that it is not guaranteed every year. We've done it for the last 3 years, and we're hoping to continue it. But that is not necessarily something that is a mandatory part of the program. But what that has looked like is that 2 years, well, I guess 3 years ago when we first did the first festival, we brought in the scholars and we didn't know exactly what we were sort of expecting. And what we found is that that cohort went on to have a lot stronger connection going forward, even when they entered college, when they started doing research together, when they started doing projects. And so really what we wanted to do is leverage an opportunity like that to build a cohort even closer than you can in a virtual world. We're very thankful to something like Zoom because we're able to do this sort of program with people from around the world with 40 different countries. And I know we're able to have calls like this, but of course, there are limitations to how close you can get to somebody just from having spoken on Zoom. And so by bringing people together in person, being able to actually talk to some of those faculty members who have taught courses, as well as tour labs around New York and experience New York City as a whole, especially for some students who have never left their home country. It's a very, formative experience for them to be able to continue and actually continue taking courses in WSS and continue working with other scholars that they've met. Do you have any other questions about that trip or?
No, I think that kind of covers most of the questions I had about the trip. Thank you very much for that answer. And please let me know if I'm hogging up too much time. I did have one more question that I wanted to ask. So I was kind of just wondering, what would you say sets this program apart the most from similar high-level math or science programs for high school and middle school students?
Yeah. So the number one thing is that our faculty is really on a very high level of being. Our faculty members every year typically consist of Nobel laureates, of breakthrough prize winners, of people who are incredibly well known in the science community, both in physics as well as in other areas of science. And so the ability to actually interact directly with them, be able to not only ask questions, but go on to actually have conversations, to hear about their experiences, not only in their actual research, but also in their careers and get that sort of insight is something that, there are other ways to sort of have those interactions, but as a whole, most students are never going to be able to actually interact with those level of professors from such a young age. The other thing is that, as I mentioned before, focusing especially on the community aspect of world science scholars, what we're really looking to do is trying to cultivate an environment where people can go on and if they enjoy being a part of research, to be able to actually be a part of that from an earlier age, and be connected with kids from around the world who share in those sorts of passions and values and can actually be team members to actually work on that research or start companies or do something along those lines. And then the last thing I'll say is that the courses, as I mentioned before, are focused not on a general area of science. These are not Physics 101 courses that you'll be taking, not even, a higher level sort of course. They're different from some of those that you would have normally experienced in a high school setting. What these courses really look like is trying to figure out what it looks like to be a researcher in science. And so as opposed to just learning a little bit about science itself, or maybe learning a lot about a different area of physics or biochemistry or neuroscience, what we're really trying to show you, and show you not only through the lectures, but also through interactions with the teaching fellows and professors, is that, what does it look like to actually be on the cutting edge of science? What does it actually look like to be doing research day in and day out? And, the different sorts of challenges, as well as how ultimately simple it is to get into a field like that. Both of those, which I think is something that a lot of our scholars have found out, is that, maybe they felt like there was a huge barrier between taking a basic physics course and actually being a researcher in physics. But after speaking with the likes of Kumud Vatha, who can actually explain what it sort of looks like, feels a lot more motivated to actually pursue that as a career. And not only just a career years down the road, but also within the next couple of years itself.
Gotcha.
That's
Well, I'd sure love
that's
to
a
ask.
really good response. I just want to add one thing on top of what James said, especially for our Mongolian students. So when I first connected with James and Jillian, one of the things that really struck me about this program was the students who completed this program get accepted into top universities, Harvard, Caltech. And one of the things that, based on my experience as a Mongolian who living in US and applied to schools, that when I applied to CMU, for example, Carnegie Mellon University is also very competitive. And when I get there, what I find is that what sets you apart from applicants to these top universities is not just your SAT score or your essay, but your projects and extracurricular activities. So if you become part of this program, it really sets your application apart from all the other applicants to top universities, especially in the STEM fields. So I think this, if you get accepted to this program and do this, it really gives you a great opportunity for your college applications and for your future science career, and also builds a strong bond with other students from these other countries. So you get to maybe study together in that college and become a co-researchers for paper, or so I think that for me, what really struck about this program is that bond that you create with other students and professors, and that then you can leverage that for your application and your future career. So that to me sounds really interesting. So I just want to highlight that.
Thank you so much. I think that's great insight into it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it would sure be lovely to ask Professor John Mather why JWST took so long and why it's so hard to get any sort of observation time on it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
that's
so much.
That's awesome. Yeah, and thank you, Sherry,
Sure.
for jumping in. But yeah, it also should be stressed that being a part of a community with people who have been able to come from especially smaller countries and reach places like Caltech, reach places like CERN, that they're also looking to look to the next cohorts of world science scholars and give them insights and to help them out along those paths. That's obviously an invaluable sort of resource that can't really be understated.
Sure. Okay, thank you so much, Patmandla. Next one, Nanding Ertinzeruk. Do you want to go next?
Hello, my name is Nandan. My apologies, I couldn't catch on what you said before. You mentioned that in the past 3 years, there was an in-person course and the WSS funded the accommodations. Is that correct? And if so, what are included in the accommodations?
Yeah, that is definitely true. That is what I said. In the last 3 cohorts, we have brought them to New York City. We have paid for their flights and for their hotels, as well as for transportation within New York City. There's certain sorts of odd expenses that might arise. For example, not every single meal is covered, but a large portion of them are. That is also, as I want to very much stress, is not something that is guaranteed to be a part of every single year. It's really based on the resources we have and to make sure it can happen. We have done it for the last 3 years, and we do hope to do it in years coming up, but it is something that I can tell you that we do fund, and we do hope to bring scholars again, but it's not something that's guaranteed. Does that help answer your question, or do you have some more
Yeah,
clarifying
thank you.
questions? Yeah.
Thank you for.
Cool. And is that all the questions you have?
Yeah, that's all the questions I have. Thank you for your time.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
thank you.
Next one is Unpat.
Good morning for the people in US and good evening for people in Mongolia. I'd like to ask something a bit more oriented about the application form itself.
Yeah.
So on the application form, it has stated that I should include many science-related activities or things I learned. And the term science is it could include many things, but from what I've heard, it seems to be we are focusing more on STEM, but I do know that you guys have mentioned we're trying to bridge into other sectors like in quantitative computing. So I myself learned computer science and economics, and economics is counted as a social science. So I was just wondering if I should include those in the application form itself.
Yep. The answer is definitely yes. Definitely include anything that is definitely integral to the sort of studying that you're doing, and anything that gives us a better insight into what sort of student you are and what your interests are. I could tell you that we have had scholars in the past who have applied, who have had some sort of STEM-related interests, like yourself with computer science, but have also taken a passion for something like economics. Economics is one of the things I also studied in college, so I do know that there are a lot of overlaps between the natural and the social sciences. And it's something that I know that especially Professor Brian Greene is very, very accommodating of, is the fact that, the social sciences should not be ignored. So I would definitely include them on your application. I would try to make sure that that's not the only thing you talk about, because we do want to make sure that you are somebody who, obviously our courses are not oriented towards economics, but rather towards the natural sciences, towards different areas of science. So we want to make sure that this is something that would benefit you as well, something you would be interested in, right? And so because of that, make sure to include something about the natural sciences, but certainly the overlap between them and the social sciences is something we'll consider.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Next is Antox Tambarcha.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Okay, I have one question. Hello, my name is Kandus. Thank you very much for what you are doing, and I'm glad that you are answering the questions here today. I just want to ask one question. I know myself to be interested and talented in science, but I recently noticed that I'm very behind from the others. Does it make any difference?
Let me see if this answers your question, and if this doesn't, feel free to just qualify it. What I'm understanding from that is that you are extremely interested and passionate about science, but you don't consider yourself somebody who's particularly good at it, from your own perspective. Is that the sort of thing that you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's somebody that, it's a little difficult to answer that question because, I've heard a number of students who have come with that perspective, who have been fantastic scholars and who are actually enormously gifted and who have been around populations that, are also enormously gifted. And so it's a little hard to sort of gauge that. And so what I would say is that you should definitely apply. And you should, explain your passions, explain why you're interested, explain why you're looking to continue your education. Now, what I'll say is that if these courses are not particularly easy, different courses range in difficulty. We had a course last year with Eric Jarvis and Konstantina Theophanopoulou on neuroscience, and on the neurobiology of vocal learning, that is, of learning how to speak and what makes humans unique. That's a course which was incredibly interesting, but I would not say required a huge amount of background knowledge at all. We've had other courses where, to understand some of the more, even if it is a conceptual course, some of the more abstract nature of something like special relativity or general relativity or quantum mechanics, those require a little bit more of sort of math or science background in order to kind of get your head around them. And so it's a little difficult to say because I don't know exactly where you are. And so I don't want to discourage you from applying based on your own sort of assessment, because I've talked to many, many students who have felt that they were behind, but really are actually quite exceptional. And so what I would recommend is applying regardless. We'll look at your application. And certainly if we think that you're somebody who is enormously passionate and also has the necessary background to get something from this program, then hopefully you could be accepted there. So I would say definitely apply regardless, and let us know what your background looks like, and we could try and assess whether it's somebody who actually would enjoy being part of the program. So I would definitely want to not discourage you from applying if you feel like you might be a little behind in terms of science versus some of your peers. Does that answer your question, or you have any qualifying questions?
No, I'm done. And thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Next one is Michelle Joe.
Hello, my name is Michelle. So I have a question regarding the application. So you have mentioned that you should demonstrate exceptional mathematical abilities in your application, but how can one demonstrate it without some Math Olympiad results or something like that?
Yeah. So one question that we ask on the form is what math courses you've taken. And so one thing is, having taken a lot of math courses at your school, even if it isn't the highest level math that exists in the world, but if you're taking pretty much every math course you can, that is something that we definitely take into account. If you are part of math programs, which look to kind of expand your knowledge beyond the normal high school setting, we also ask, is there any books that you particularly like? Are there any sorts of other resources you use, whether they're online, whether there's a YouTube channel you really like? We ask all those sorts of things. And so if you explain all of those, what we're really trying to do is assess whether you're somebody who's trying to take advantage of whatever resources that exist to try and push math a little bit further. And we'll look at some of that math that you're looking at and see if it's something that is somebody who probably has the skill set to be able to take our courses. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So that means that if I'm a self-learner, so I should mention the online courses that I found on websites, right?
100%. We have a lot of self-learners in the
Nice.
program. We have a lot of people who don't have a traditional sort of schooling system, who come in, who are really trying to take advantage of online resources. And if you can demonstrate that you're doing that, it's actually something that we especially love to see, because it shows that you're taking initiative and you're sort of trying to take your own education into your own hands. And it's something that we definitely pay attention to.
Okay, so I have a last question.
Yeah.
So how do the students communicate with each other on which platform do?
Yeah. So we have a World Science Scholars platform where they can take all the different courses. There's also, with any single lecture, there's some questions that accompany it to try and help make sure that you understand what's going on, as well as some discussion questions. And those discussion questions focus on different material in the lectures and usually are a little bit more open-ended for scholars to have conversations. The other thing is we have a Discord that a lot of scholars are very active in, and will not only reach out based on sort of course material, but also based on something else that they find interesting, an article they read or some research paper they read, and sharing that with other people, as well as just trying to get to know each other a little bit more. The last thing I'll also say is those recitations and office hours, oftentimes they turn into also conversations with the teaching fellow, with each other, and it gives them more of an opportunity to communicate there.
Okay. Do the courses come with assignments, and are the assignments like group projects?
Yeah. So there aren't assignments in the same way as, for example, you might find in a high school setting. We have certain questions that you can take that after watching a lecture to make sure you understand the material. That's not something, we don't even take a look at how you do on those questions. It's not something that we're, for example, grading you on. The bigger assignments are the projects, which are part of a lot of the courses. And those, as I mentioned, one of the best examples is the Stephen Wolfram course that the scholars are taking right now. That involves learning a little bit of the Wolfram language and working in a group or even individually, if you would like, on some different area of scientific research or on really anything you want. But you're guided by this teaching fellow that we have, as well as by Stephen Wolfram himself, to try and finish those projects. And so those are some of the bigger sorts of activities that we do. But those are definitely not, for example, what you might think of as a traditional problem set. I would not say that we have a whole lot of those.
Okay, thank you, James.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, for your question. I just want to add one thing here as well. Not, in my experience, not everybody come with same sort of resources and opportunities. We've come from very different backgrounds. So coming from Mongolia, for example, when I was in Mongolia, I was almost self-learning English. Our Peace Corps teachers in 6th grade teach very basics, ABCs, and that's it. But I really wanted to learn English, continue to learn English. So in my application to college, I talked about how I was in the countryside. I was living in гэр хороол. Монгол хүүхдүүд бүгдээ гэр хороол гэж мэдчихэж штэ тий. Хөдөө амьдардаг, гэр хороол амьдардаг. I didn't even have electricity or internet, so I had to make a candle, oil candle, in order to study my English in the middle of the night. And then I didn't have textbooks to learn English. but I bought this English dictionary, and that was the only book I had. And I just started memorizing words from that English dictionary. And I didn't have any listening tools, internet. So I listened to English songs, and then I tried to understand what the English song is saying. And that's how I improved my English. So explaining that in my essay helped communicate to my application college admissions folks where I come from, how self-motivated I am. And so it's not only about what scores you get and all that, but also communicating your unique opportunities and how,
Yeah.
you know, where you are. And I think that will help communicate how motivated and self-determined you are. So I think that's important to highlight in your application.
For sure.
So
Thank
just
you for
like
sharing
that.
that, Shuri. Yeah. And that's something to keep in mind, not just for WSS, but really going forward, if you guys are going to be applying to any sort of university, if a lot of other programs, is that I know very few review committees on any sort of college or program or anything that don't take that into account. That is a huge part of pretty much every single admissions process.
So just монголоор нэг юм хэлэхэд монгол хүүхдүүд ингээд айгүй өөрсдөө бахархдаг, айгүй юм бахархаа ингээд бахархаад өөрсдийнхөө ингээд нэг бэрхшээл туулсан зовлонгоо ерөөсө бичих хүчдэг байхгүй юу. Гэхдээ тэгж actually бичих нь та нарыг давуу талтай болгож байгаа байхгүй юу. Тийм ээ. Тэгэхээр зэрэг өөрсөндөө байгаа ингээд нэг одоо юу гэдэг ингээд lack of resource нуухгүйгээр ичлгүүгээр бичих нь харин ч та нарт нэмэртэй байдаг гэдэг хэлдэг байгаа байхгүй ойлгогдсон үү те. Okay, next we have Гүнбэлэг Батжансан.
Hi, I'm a gap year student, so I'm not qualified for the program, and I was wondering if I could enroll with the program, like any kind of like a volunteer or intern. And I love science, and I'm a full-time like ACT math teacher, and I used to compete with the chemistry international and both national Olympiads. So yeah.
Awesome. That's thanks for sharing that. I just put my personal email into the chat, and that's available for anybody else as well. If you want to email me anytime today or tomorrow or anytime this week, if you want to give me a little bit more background about yourself, we can schedule a quick Zoom call to talk a little bit more about it and see if there might be something we can do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Genbyak.
Great. All right. Thanks for the question. The next one is Huslin Munk Uchrel. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do, like, again.
Oh, okay.
No problem.
Yeah, so I do the IB program, and but I don't take physics and the higher level mathematics. I kind of dropped it because this is hard. But I study biology and chemistry and economics, social sciences and the sciences. Yeah, so should I be confident, like?
Yeah, I think if you're going to ask if that's acceptable for this program, I'll say this. We have a lot of scholars who are part of the IB program. I know how rigorous the IB program is. And so that is definitely kudos to you to be part of that. And I will say that being part of any sort of science within the IB program is definitely something that, you know, we respect greatly, and it's something that we'll definitely take into consideration on your application. If you're not part of high level math and physics, the only question that really matters in that sense is this. It's that, you know, our courses, some of them will be in more biology and chemistry, and there will be some in physics. And so if taking those physics courses is something that you would also be interested in addition to the rest of them, it's something that you should definitely apply to the program. And, you know, our physics courses don't require very complicated mathematics. And for example, Professor Brian Green's course, which is taught at the beginning of every single year, covers, as I mentioned before, special relativity, general relativity, and quantum mechanics conceptually. We're not looking deeply into the math. We have an optional math section for the special relativity, but it would be absolutely insane to think that we could learn the high-level math that goes behind general relativity and quantum mechanics within, you know, 6 weeks. So that is not definitely part of it. So if it's something that you'll be interested in, exploring things like that, then I would say that you should definitely still apply to the program. And being part of an IB program for something like chemistry definitely is very impressive and something that we will definitely take a look at.
So we are actually 4 minutes over the meeting. So I'd like to just go through the last 2 questions and then, wrap up the call. So next one is Naman Zul Munk Duvshan. And then инх жаргал цэнжав гэд бас нэг өөр нэг энд олон инх жаргал цэнжав байгаа. Гэтэ нэг нь ургацсан байсан. Дараа нь тэр асууж болно шүү. За. Naman Zul, do you have question?
Yes. So my name is Nemzul and I have some questions about the program itself. You mentioned before that scholars partake in projects to further explore course concepts and work with faculty, but how exactly does it work and how does it look like?
Yeah.
How do we do this online?
Scholars. So the real answer is that it depends on the course, and that our projects often look very different depending on what the course actually looks like. And so there's not maybe one blanketed answer. I could give you a couple examples, which might give you a better understanding of what those look like. I've talked about the Stephen Wolfram one a number of times now. To give you a little bit of different background, we had a course with Nim Tottenham, who's a neuroscientist at Columbia University this year. And working with her and her teaching fellow, they put together a project where they were able to do a review of other articles, meaning that what they were able to do is look at other articles on connected areas of neuroscience. This was developmental neuroscience. Take the data that was collected from those different papers, and then in groups, reanalyze that data to come up with novel sorts of conclusions from it. That's definitely a different project than the Stephen Wolfram one, which is a lot more open-ended. That's something that, really learn Wolfram language and then do anything you want is really the sort of prompt for that. Now we focus a lot more on physics research for that, but you could do really anything. For the NIM course, it was a little bit closer to a little bit more guided, but really you were able to try and just explore. A lot of these are focused on exploration and on trying to take whatever you've learned in the lectures and see what else can I do about this? What can I learn about how to actually do research or do something unique in that sort of field? And so that's the NIM Taughted course. The one other example I'll give you is we had a course with Barbara Natterson Horowitz, who's a professor of medicine as well as biology at Harvard and UCLA. And her course was especially focused on human exceptionalism, which is an idea that humans are very unique from other animals. And so when we're looking at the medical background of a human and we're trying to analyze the different diseases and their vulnerability to disease, we feel intuitively like it should be different from looking at something like a dog. However, if you really look at a lot of the biology, Dr. Natterson Horowitz, posits that we actually should be looking at commonalities between different species and trying to glean insights from that, because really humans are not that different from other animals. That's her perspective, I should say. And so a project that was focused on there was actually working with the teaching fellow at the time, who was a postdoctoral researcher in Barbara's lab, who was able to actually guide students on calls to try and actually do some of that investigation themselves, to find out where diseases that are traditionally associated with humans can actually be found in other sorts of species as well, and what can be learned from that. And I could say that at the very end of every single course, you get on a live call with the professor themselves, and they'll be able to talk about projects, give some feedback, and answer questions. It's not always just one call. Sometimes professors get on multiple calls. Sometimes they're more involved throughout the course. But certainly for every single course, you're on at least one live call with a faculty member who's going to go through projects as well as answer questions. Does that give you a little bit more of a background information on that? I know, yes, I'm sorry, I can't give you a very clear answer to something like that.
Oh, really? Oh, then I just was wondering if we won't be able to work in the lab with these professors because we have an online platform.
Yeah.
Then how the research itself will work and how we will engage with other students and work with them on the project.
Yeah, great question. What I could tell you first about doing research in other labs, we've had scholars who have gone on from the program to actually reach out to some of those professors and work in their labs. That is not something that is part of the program itself. We have those projects, as I mentioned, we have the lectures, but working in an actual lab is not always part of the necessary part of the program. But we do have scholars who reach out to faculty members, get connected, and do work in labs. We've had them both do them remotely and in person. I know that if you're going to be in Mongolia, it's going to be a little difficult because we have never had a faculty member from Mongolia yet. Maybe we will one day. But some professors are able to actually do remote research with students. And a lot of that does involve usually sort of data analysis, collecting data that's being done somewhere else in the world, and trying to come up with some sort of conclusions and working with a team, usually over Zoom. That's what I can say on that. In terms of communicating, I know we had the question a little earlier about the different avenues that scholars can communicate with each other. One of the big ones is Zoom. We have the platform, we have discussion groups, and we have the Discord forum. Those are all great tools that are used. We also have WhatsApp groups, and sometimes people will directly message each other on email or anything else. But always getting on Zoom calls is some of the best ways you can do that. And I know that there are some timing issues with that, but usually we try to pair you with group members who are definitely from other countries, so you could get that sort of experience, but are in similar enough time zones that it's not too difficult to actually come up with projects.
All right. Thank
Does
you
that
very
answer your
much.
question? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think we've covered everybody who raised their hands, who haven't asked any questions.
Sure, you have one more
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Michelle, yeah? Michelle, I think you raised your hand, right?
Oh
Next
yeah,
question.
Michelle.
It's okay. My question got answered. Actually, I was going to ask how important mathematical achievements are compared to like scientific achievements.
Yeah. Yeah, what I would say is that when the program first started, we were focusing primarily on mathematics, and what we've learned over the years is that we're more receptive to look at either. So if you're focused mostly on science now and not as much on math, it's something that, even though it wasn't initially part of the program, it's something that we really do value now, pretty much equally with mathematics.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Did I miss anybody who haven't asked any question and raised their hand? Oh, okay, looks like we've covered everybody. So yeah, I'd like to thank James again, and also I'd like to thank everybody who participated today. Iggy, do you have any final words to share?
No, I think that, yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a very good session. Yeah, I hope our students understand what students they are looking for. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And thank you,
Yeah.
Sherry. Thank you, Anka, for putting this together. It's great to see so many of you on this call. The last thing I'll say is if any questions at all arise, definitely reach out to the scholars at worldsciencefestival.com email, and we'll be able to get back to you very quickly. And the other thing I'll just remind you guys about is that applications are due the 15th, but we're willing to extend that for all of you guys to April 21st for your portion. And I mentioned the recommendations. If you guys can, of course, get the recommendations in at the same time, that would be fantastic. But we are never going to penalize you just because we know that when you reach out to a teacher now for even a quick recommendation, they may feel like they have a busier schedule. And just so you guys know, that's not going to disqualify you. So definitely try to get them in by April 15th. But for you guys, if you get them in by April 21st, we'll definitely put you into our application pool. So thank you guys. We really do hope that a lot of you guys apply, and we're looking forward to finding our first Mongolian world science scholars. And especially with all of your questions, you guys have been enormously impressive today. So congrats to all of your guys' accomplishments. And so I know that you guys would definitely be great fits for the program. And so hopefully somebody on this call becomes our first world science scholar from Mongolia. Awesome.
Actually, two quick things. First, the recommendation letter deadline is not April 21st then. The recommendation letter can come after April 21st,
yeah.
Is that correct?
So,
okay.
Yeah, so essentially what I'm saying is that please try to get it by April 21st. However, if you're freaking out because you haven't gotten them in quite yet, we're not going to disqualify you because that portion of the application has not come in. So please do make every effort you can to try and get them in then. It's just that we don't want you guys freaking out thinking that you can't apply because a teacher hasn't gotten in the recommendation yet.